Hello and a very good day to Dr. Agnes and my fellow friends. I hope everyone is doing great. So for today, my group will be presenting about topic 1, where we analyze the use of figurative language in poems and how it affects the effectiveness of the poem. So before we start, firstly, my name is Rahana Yasmin binti Ahmad Kushairi. My metric number is 148053. Okay, so firstly, figurative language. What is figurative language? Well, we can understand figurative language as words or phrases used by the poet in their poems to convey a meaning that is different from the literal interpretation. Usually, figurative language requires the readers to understand some extra nuances or context in order for them to understand the hidden meaning or the second meaning of the words or any phrases or any expressions used by the poet in the poems. As we all know, there are many types of figurative language, including the literary devices that we are already familiar with, such as the simile, metaphor, personification, and many more. So we can see here that a lot of literary works, especially poem, use figurative language. So the question here is why the poet used figurative language in poems. One of the reasons is because it is a way to communicate abstract or complex ideas to help the readers gain a deeper understanding about the poem. Figurative language helps the readers to figure out what the poem is actually about or what the message the poet tried to convey to the readers through the poem. Another reason for the use of figurative language in poem is because it creates mental images to the readers. Figurative language somehow appeals to the senses of the readers, the five senses where we have auditory, tactile, visual, olfactory, and gustatory, which describe the taste. The images formed in the mind of the readers somehow makes the poem to be more engaging and more interesting. Figurative language also helps to elicit emotions to the readers. It somehow builds a connection of the poet's feeling, the poet's emotions with the readers. It affects how the readers feel when they read the poem, and this feeling will eventually help the readers to understand the poem that they read. Okay, next we have examples of figurative language. We have metaphor, SNS, alliteration, simile, hyperbole, onomatopoeia, personification, and imagery. There are actually a lot more examples of figurative language, but for today's presentation, my group will be focusing on metaphor, assonance, alliteration, simile, imagery, and personification. I'm pretty sure that most of us are already familiar with this figurative language. Okay, so my group will be analyzing 3 poems. So for the first poem, we have a poem by John Keats, The Ode to a Nightingale. Basically, this poem is about the transience of life and the tragedy of old age. For the second poem, we have Patriot into Traitor by Robert Browning. This poem is a tragic poem which focuses on the turmoil of leaders in politics. And last but not least, we have the poem Sleep by Annie Matheson. This poem tells us about a peaceful night where the speaker can relax and forget all about the troubles and worries. So, without further ado, my friend Rihanna will tell us more about the first poem, Ode to a Nightingale.
Hello and good day to Dr. Agnes and to all my fellow friends. So I am the first presenter. My name is Rihanna Rikalim. I am a TESOL student. My matrix number is 148592. So for today, the first poem that my group chose was Ode to a Nightingale, written by John Keats. This poem is an 8-stanza poem that was written in 1819. Right? Alright, so I would be presenting the figurative languages that could be found in Ode to a Nightingale. after analyzing the poem. So first off is simile. Simile could be found in line 71, stanza 8. Quoted, forlorn, the very word is like a bell. So here the poet is comparing forlorn to a bell. Forlorn being an emotion that we feel, and a bell which is an object. The poet is expressing that the word forlorn is a bell, which acts as a reminder that he is lonely in this world. It is also meant to restore the poet from his fixation with the nightingale, which is a big symbol in the poem, and back to consciousness that he cannot escape life even with the help of his imagination. So the word like is used to compare forlorn and bell, which makes it a simile. The next figurative language is personification. So personification could be found in line 29, stanza 3. Quoted, where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes. The poem personified beauty and refers to the term as if beauty is a human and have shining eyes that can see the world. Next is from line 36, stanza 4. Quoted, and happily the queen moon is on her throne. The poet personified the moon and referred to it as a human of royalty, which is a queen sitting on a throne. What the poet meant by this is that he refers to the moon as the queen of the sky, who is sitting on her throne surrounded by her stars, whereas a queen who is surrounded by her peoples. The next figurative language is alliteration. So alliteration is the repetition of consonant sounds in the same lines. There are many alliterations that could be found throughout the poem when we analyze it. So here are a few examples that I will be reading. First of all is from line 7, stanza 1, the repetition of the consonant sounds the, th. Quoted, that thou, light wind, dryad of the trees. Next would be from line 15, stanza 2, alliteration start in the bright B sound. Quoted, all for a beaker full of warm south, full of the true, the blushful hypocrine, with beaded bubbles winking at the brim. So here are just a few examples of alliterations that could be found in Ode to a Nightingale poem. So next I will be presenting the effectiveness of such language to the poem. So first is alliteration. So alliterations is used to create a rhythm, a mood, and to help the readers understand the secondary meaning of a word in the poem besides its literal meaning. So for an example that I took was from line 1 to 3, stanza 1, the repetition of the letter D. Quoted, my heart aches and a drowsy numbness pains my sense as though of hemlock I had drunk or emptied some dull opiate to the drains. The repetition of the many D sounds could be found in these lines. It signals a heavy voiced consonant that adds a sense of weight and insisting a thudding to these lines. Given that the speaker is talking about being very down and feeling intoxicated, but when we analyze the poem Ode to a Nightingale, it is appropriate to assume that the poet has carried a lot of burdens on his shoulders. Given that the mood of the poem is rather depressing and sad, and if we analyze the poem and if we understand it, it shows clearly that the poet is definitely depressed and is often looking for ways to escape the reality of life, be it through drinking alcohol or through imagining things that brings immortality. So next is simile. Forlorn, the very word is like a bell. The use of comparing two things that just aren't put together. So the poet compared forlorn, which is an emotion, to bell, an object. The simile highlights that the poet who is feeling forlorn, feeling abandoned, sad, lonely in the real world of mortality. It paints a picture to the readers that the bell is a constant ringing reminder in the poet's mind that when his imagination of immortality ends, he is back to the harsh reality of life that is painful and intolerable. When we analyze the poem, it is clear that the writer or the poet is trying to paint a vivid image in the reader's mind that he is constantly feeling abandoned or feeling lonely in this world of mortality. And that feeling encourages and heightens the desire to escape life. Therefore, he included the very word is like a bell, which is constantly a reminder in his head. Next is personification. So in stanza 3, where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes. So the term beauty, which is a non-human thing, it is a term, is given a human trait, which is eyes. In the poem, it is meant that even in the human world, where everything dies, beauty will never last. This refers back to the poet's meaning of mortality, that everything in the world will eventually die as this world is only temporary and none of us are immortal. So that is all for my part. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Hasabila Atika binti Najmin. My metric number is 146453. I'm going to present about figurative language and its effectiveness in the poem Ode to a Night Angle. So the first one is metaphor. As we can see in line 1 and 2, stanza 1, my heart ache and a drowsy numbness pains, my sense as though of hemlock I had drunk. In these two lines, the poet is comparing his dullness pain with the feeling of a drunk man to forget his pain and live at the moment in happiness. And as for the second one, is in line 5, stanza 2. Oh, for a beaker full of warm south. Here, the poet compares liquid with the southern country weather. The poet wants to stick to south into a bottle, which is a beaker, and guzzle the whole thing down. He wants to distill the earth down to its powerful intoxicating essence. The third one will be seen in stanza 4. I will fly to the not charioted by Bacchus and his parts, but on the viewless wings of poesy. The poet used the metaphor of flight to describe the power of poetry, to allow him to soar in his imagination and be with the night angle. So the second figurative language will be imagery. The poet has used image to present a clear and vivid picture of his miserable plight. For example, in line 2, stanza 1, though of hemlock I had drunk. The poet feels woozy and numb. Imagine him swaying back and forth and kind of drunk and out of it. And the second one is in line 7, stanza 8, past the near meadows. Next will be in line 7, stanza 5, fast fading violets covered up in leaves. The poet names more plant that he smells in the darkness. The section all relates to the experience of being alone in the dark but not a frightening forest. The third figurative language will be assonance. It is the repetition of same vowel sounds in the same line of poetry. For example, repetition of the sound O. For example, in the poem, in some melodious thought. So there is 4 repetition of O. And the next one is repetition of the sound I. The voice I hear this passing night was heard. Now I will explain about the effectiveness of the figurative language that I have explained before. So as for the effectiveness of metaphor, as metaphor delivers more than literal significance, it can make a reader understand something at a deeper level than any literal description. Metaphors appeal directly to the senses, and the poet used metaphor to describe things that can't be said in ordinary language. For example, I will fly to the not charioted by Bacchus and his parts, but on the viewless wings of poesy. The second one is imagery. The use of imagery make the readers visualize of the writer's feelings, emotion, or ideas. For example, in the poem, "Though of hemlock I had drunk." By this, the poet has used image to present a clear and vivid picture of his miserable plight. He wants to say that he kind of drunk and out of it. The third one will be assonance. By using assonance, it helps to draw readers' attention to specific words and phrases in the poems. For example, in the poem's opening line, the long A sound repeats in edge, pains, and drains, stretching out these words and drawing readers' attention to the intensity of the poet's pain. I think that's all from me. Thank you.
A very good day to Dr. Agnes and my fellow friends. My name is Alicia, matrix number 147344. I'm going to explain about this poem, Patriot into Traitor by Robert Browning. And this poem is about the instability of the world of politics and how people seem to change their mind uh because of their political leaders and what they did and the actions they did. So this poem consists of 6 stanzas and each stanza consists of 5 lines. And we shall proceed. Number 1, simile. In line 2 we can see, with myrtle mixed in my path like mad. The word mad here doesn't mean angry or anger, but instead it meant the craziness of the villagers when they see their leader coming back. From the poem we know in the first and second stanza, the villagers were all very happy because of the achievement that the leader have made. And when the leader came back, they were all excited to welcome the leader. Secondly, personification. In line 3, the house roofs seem to heave and sway. Heave and sway is action where only human can produce, but instead it used on house roofs. So here it gives us a kind of view where people are all around excited climbing over each other, and it seems like the house is all moving, because everyone is so excited to welcome their leader. And thirdly, metaphors. It was roses, roses all the way. The use of roses here doesn't mean the flower. It symbolizes the love of the people for their leader. And in line 14 you can see, and you see my harvest, what I reap. Harvest here means the leader's actions and the deeds where he had done before. What I reap means what he get, and that refer to his actions and consequences. Okay, number 4, imagery. Here I provide a few examples of imagery from the poem. Firstly, visual imagery, where also the line 3, the house roof seemed to heave and sway because there are so many people over each other. They were all climbing here and there. They were pushing each other. You can see the kind of view. You can imagine being there, seeing everyone so excited. Secondly, auditory imagery. The old walls rock with the crowd and cries because the old walls, the the you can hear the crowd, you can feel, you can hear all the screams, the laughter, the shout. They are all so excited. They were all crowding around. Even the wall seems to the creaking sound of old walls, the old kampong walls where when you walk and then there's kind of sound, right? So this is like everyone's so excited. They were all walking here and there, they were all rushing here and there. You seem to hear it. And the thirdly, tactile imagery. A rope cuts both my wrists behind. Even a small paper cut, you can feel it. In here he's talking about a rope cuts both my wrists behind, so you can seem to feel the pain and the pain of the rope cutting his wrist. And number 5, alliteration, where occurrence of the same letter or sound at the beginning of closely connected words. Crowd and cries, sun, skies,
both behind, fill, forehead. As for assonance, it is the repetition of vowels, only vowels. Okay, no repetition of consonants. Example, see, reap, the E is there, seemed, heave, wrote both with the O, feel and bleed with the E. So these are figurative languages that I found in the poem. That's all. Thank you.
Hello and a very good morning to Dr. Agnes and fellow students. I am Nafatin Arisha and I will be presenting about the effectiveness of figurative languages used in the poem Patriarch Infiltrator by Robert Browning. The first element is simile. Based on the given example from line 2 of the poem, the poet wants to connect the images together and convey the feeling of madness. But the word mad here doesn't literally mean crazy, but rather the poet is telling us that there's myrtle everywhere in his path. It indicates the enthusiasm of the people on the arrival of their leader. The second element is personification. The poet gives some sort of human traits to a non-human object, which in this case, the house roofs. It helps readers to connect and react emotionally to the personified object. The reader will understand and relate to the personified objects as if they are living beings. It simply shows the state of deterioration in the leader's fame. The next element is metaphor. The poet uses the metaphor of the roses to activate readers' imagination and impressions. As roses symbolize the people's love and affection towards their leader, it creates images that are easier to understand too, rather than using literal language. So how is imagery effective in a poem? Well, it helps readers to create scenes or images in their mind when reading the poem. Based on the example given, the house roofs heaving and swaying shows that the road is now empty. The air broke, which probably refers to the rain, acts like a negative agent as it creates a scene of misery which changes the mood of the poem. A rope cuts both my wrists behind, gives the image of the leader being in pain. Visual imagery lets the reader to visualize the scene, auditory imagery lets them hear the scene, and tactile imagery helps them feel the scene. So the use of imagery is very important in a poem so that the readers relate to it. Alliteration creates rhythm and mood of this poem as well as the tone. For example, crowd and cries. It emphasizes the respect the crowd has for the leader, that they would cheer for him with their cries rocking the wall. Next and the last element is assonance. So assonance focuses readers' attention to a certain part of the poem. For an instance, in stanza 5, feel and bleed. The leader was once respected, but now that he is seen as a traitor, the people throw stones at him. He walks with blood on his forehead, and he can feel the trickling of the blood. So now the reader's attention is focused on this one particular part of the poem. So in conclusion, the effectiveness of these figurative languages are all about conveying the emotions and intentions of the poet. It's important to leave an impact on the readers. That's all from me. Thank you.
On to the third poem, which is Sleep by Annie Matheson. The figurative languages that can be found in this poem are personification, metaphor, simile, alliteration, assonance, and finally imagery. First of all, personification. On the second stanza and at the first line, you can see the phrase tired roses. The roses are personified to a feeling of a human. Tired is a human behavior, and we all know that roses don't feel tired. This line presents that roses are being passionately sweet, and after a long day being exposed to a heat, it's time for the roses to take a rest and radiate their beauty. On the same stanza as well, and at the sixth line, you can see the personification of the phrase kind sleep. As we can see, sleep is a human behavior, whereas kind sleep, like sleep can never be kind, so that automatically shows a personification in the poem. Moving on to simile. The usage of the word as and like can be identified in the poem. For example, on the third stanza and at the first line, white lilies, pure as falling snow. White lilies are being compared to a snow using the word as. You can immediately see that the image of the lilies are like and being compared to a snow, which is the color white. Next example you can see is on the fourth stanza and at the first line, which is the air is like a mother's hand. The air is compared to a mother's hand using the word like. This means that the air is comforting and warm like a soft mother's hand. Few lines of metaphor can also be identified in the poem. For example, on the first stanza and at the fourth line, shake o'er my head thy slumber swings. Nightfall is being compared to something that flies, that we can see the poet used the word wings. This wings also initiate or interpret the meaning of freedom. Next example we can see is on the fifth stanza and at the second line with steadfast eloquence. This means great concentration. This means that when we contemplate our fate and pray with good concentration, God will eventually and will always open our hearts and we will feel calm again regardless of our situation. This also indicates that the poet has a religious side in her through delivering this poem. There are many alliteration that can be found in this poem. Here are the few of the examples. On the first stanza and at the first line, soft silence of the summer night. Soft silence, summer. The poet emphasizes the letter S in this line. And on the second stanza and at the sixth line, kind sleep the weary world bereaves. Weary world. The poet emphasizes the letter W in this sentence. And at the fourth stanza and on the third line, and o'er the darksome dewy land, darksome dewy. The poet emphasizes the letter D in this line. Assonance can also be found in the poem, such as stanza 2, line 2, laid softly on a throbbing brow. Softly on throbbing brow, the letter O is being emphasized. Second stanza and at the fourth line, a maze of tangled fragrance weaves. A maze tangled fragrant weaves. The letter A is being emphasized. The first stanza and at the second line, alive with wistful murmurings. Wistful murmurings. The letter U is being emphasized by the poet. Many imagery can be found in the poem, such as visual, auditory, and tactile. For visual, the mignonette about my feet. Mignonette is a plant with spikes of greenish flowers. Therefore, we can imagine using our eyes virtually with the image given to us by the poet. For the auditory, music of sleepy winds that bless buds that grow. We can use our imagination, hearing the windy wind through our ears like what has been explained in the poem. For tactile, so cool and light. This sentence describes the line before it, which is about the nightfall. Meaning to say that the nightfall is cool and light. We can imagine using our touch that the nightfall the poet has experienced being calm, cool, and light using our touch.
Hello everyone, good morning to Doctor and my fellow friends. I am Ishimin. My matrix number is 145589 and I am a second year TESOL student. Okay, today I will be presenting on effectiveness of the figurative language in a poem of Sleep by Annie Matheson. The first figurative language that I found in this poem is simile. Simile is to provide a concrete image to readers. It is also a comparison between something and something else, so the readers have a sensory image to hold in his or her mind. It is also understanding between something that might not be concrete is same as the something that is concrete. So the readers are able to understand the image that experienced by the poet through simile. Okay, for example, in this poem, the white lily is compared to the snow because the image of the white lily is same as the image of the snow. So the poet wanted to show the beauty of the environments that he sees or that he experienced with the flowers. So through simile, the readers are able to imagine the beauty of the environment that poet experienced. Okay, the second figurative language that I found is personifications. Personification is to give an object a human trait and to create a vivid imagery and memorable symbolism. Okay, back to the poem. Okay, we'll look at this sentence. Tire rose, passionately sweet, are leaning on their cool green leaves. Okay, this sentence, the rose is personified because the rose will not get tired and the rose will not lean on the cool green leaf. Of this characteristic is human trait. Okay. So in this sentence, the rose symbolized the poet wanted to have a good sleep, and the poet ignored the tire were suffering from the noise. Okay. The third figurative language is metaphor. Metaphor is to create images that are easier to understand, to activate the imaginations, and to convey emotions and impressions. Okay, the metaphor also to give a deeper level of understanding, and the poet used metaphor to describe the things that might not be cannot be said in ordinary languages. Okay, based on the example that I found in Poem of Sleep is this sentence. Shake over my head, time slumberous wings. Okay, in this sentence, what is the meaning of this sentence? Actually, in this sentence, the nightfall is compared to the something that flies, and the wings show the meaning of freedom. So this is the idea of the poet. Okay, the next figurative languages is imagery. Imagery is to link the language to the reader's imaginations. Okay, the readers able to feel the feeling of poets through imagery. So the poet highlight every single details through visual, tactile, and audio imagery. Okay, the last one is alliterations and assonance. Okay, both of these actually are to create the rhythm in the poem. In comparisons, alliteration is to create the to create head rhythm, while the assonance is to develop the internal rhythm. Okay, both of these are to attract readers' attentions and to enhance the pleasure of reading. In addition, both of these are to highlight the mood of relaxed, calm, and peaceful of the poet in this poem. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you.
So, as a conclusion, we can say that figurative language is language that is intended to create image or other effects in the mind of the readers so that they can have a deeper and a better understanding of the poems. When a writer or a poet use figurative language, they are actually trying to give a fresh and a unique way of explaining something to the readers. We can also conclude that figurative language is one of the most important tools in literary works or in poetry. This is because it gives more colors and dimension to poetry. Figurative language also shows the beauty of language used in poetry, which makes it more impactful towards the readers. Okay, I believe that's all from us. Thank you.